Happy Sabbath! How are you all? I hope you all had a wonderful, wonderful week, enjoying the blessings from God. And tonight I continue to pray that the Lord will be with you, protect you, give you peace, love, and joy. Tonight we're going to study chapter 32 of Genesis. Let's read verse 1. As Jacob started on his way again, angels of God came to meet him. When Jacob saw them, he exclaimed, "This is God's camp." So he named the place Mahanaim. After the encounter with Laban, Jacob restarts his journey, going back home. As the hills of his homeland appear before him in the distance, the heart of Jacob was moved. All the past, all the things that had happened vividly appear before him. He is remembering all those things. Remembering his sin, also remember God's favor towards him and God's promises of divine help and guidance. All this came to his mind. And then, as he drew closer and closer to the end of his journey, the thought of Esau also came to him. And that thought made him anxious, made him worry. He was afraid that Esau might still be holding the grudge and will come to take revenge. And while he was contemplating these foreboding thoughts, guess who came to meet him? The passage said, the angels. And Ellen White, in her book, Patriarchs and Prophets, said there were two groups of heavenly angels traveling with him. One group in front of him, and the other was behind him. Well, are these the same angels from 20 years ago? The ones that he saw in his dream at Bethel when he was a young man running away from his brother Esau? If you recall his dream, these angels were the ascending and descending angels from the ladder that leads to heaven. To remember God's protection, Jacob named the place Mahanaim, meaning two camps, the two groups of angels. Let's continue to read verse 3. Then Jacob sent messengers ahead to his brother Esau, who was living in the region of Seir, in the land of Edom. He told them, "Give this message to my master Esau. Humble greetings from your servant Jacob. Until now, I have been living with Uncle Laban. And now I own cattle, donkeys, flocks of sheep and goats, and many servants, both men and women. I have sent these messengers to inform my lord of my coming, hoping that you will be friendly to me." It sounds like Jacob wants to convey a message or sending a message to Esau that he is returning with his own wealth, sufficient for him and his family, and he is not returning home to claim the family inheritance. He sends the greeting, implies that Jacob was hoping he and his brother will be able to put their past behind. Verse 6. After delivering the message, the messenger returned to Jacob and reported, "We met your brother Esau, and he's already on his way to meet you with an army of 400 men." Jacob was terrified at the news. He divided his household along with the flocks and herds and camels into two groups. He thought, if Esau's meet one group and attacks it, perhaps the other group can escape. Well, sending a greeting was a good start and a friendly gesture. Jacob was hoping that would help to put the past behind, all the animosity would be forgotten. But the answer he received frightened him, because Esau was coming to meet him with 400 men, and it was unclear whether his intentions were friendly. Jacob probably remembers a story about his grandfather Abraham, who only had 380 men and was able to defeat 5 kings. Now Esau is bringing 400 men with him. What kind of damage would he cause? Verse 9. Then Jacob prayed, O God of my grandfather Abraham and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, you told me, return to your own land and to your relatives, and you promised me I will treat you kindly. I am not worthy of all the unfailing love and faithfulness you have shown to me, your servant. When I left home and crossed the Jordan River, I owned nothing except a walking stick. Now my household fills 2 large camps. O Lord, please rescue me from the hand of my brother Esau. I am afraid that he is coming to attack me along with my wives and children. But you promised me I will surely treat you kindly, and I will multiply your descendants until they become as numerous as the sands along the seashore, too many to count. Jacob was truly afraid because 20 years ago, Esau had planned to kill him for the stolen blessing. Perhaps with his 400 men, he was coming to do just that. At this point, Jacob reaches out to the higher power. He started to pray. Jacob's prayer plays a crucial role in reversing the situation. Jacob prayed for safety and then appealed to the covenant promises that God had made earlier. In his prayer, Jacob said, I am not worthy. A spiritual transformation had taken place in Jacob. He recognized his unworthiness before God. Jacob recognized God's unfailing love and faithfulness, and he used these words to describe God's loyalty to his covenant promises. Jacob now identified himself fully with God's covenant to Abraham and Isaac, and his faith rested firmly on God's covenant promises. Verse 13. Jacob stayed where he was for the night. Then he selected these gifts from his possessions to present to his brother Esau: 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 female camels with their young, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 male donkeys. He divided these animals into herds and assigned each to different servants. Then he told his servants, Go ahead of me with the animals, but keep some distance between the herds. Gifts Jacob selected were gifts from his possession for his brother Esau. You know, the Hebrew word for gift here denotes tribute, a gift expressing loyalty to a superior. The gift was 550 animals. It was no small gift. It was an extravagant gift. Just a side note, why give more female than male animals? Well, for purposes of livestock breeding, a higher ratio of female to male animal is ideal. 20 rams could easily impregnate 200 ewes. A reverse ratio would have produced a herd a tenth of the size and would have led to competition and fighting among the rams. while Jacob knew what he was doing. Well, now back to the story. Then he gave instruction to his servants to divide the animals into herds and assign each herd to different servants. And then he told his servants to go ahead of him and keep some distance between the herds. Verse 17. He gave these instructions to the men leading the first group. When my brother Esau meets you, he will ask, "Whose servants are you? Where are you going? Who owns these animals?" You must reply, "They belong to your servant Jacob, but they are a gift for his master Esau. Look, he is coming right behind us." Jacob gave the same instructions to the second and third herdsmen and to all who follow behind the herds. You must say the same thing to Esau when you meet him. And be sure to say, "Look, your servant Jacob is right behind us." Jacob thought, "I would try to appease him by sending gifts ahead of me. When I see him in person, perhaps he will be friendly to me." So the gifts were sent on ahead, while Jacob himself spent that night in the camp. Jacob sending different waves of gifts to Esau. He gave specific instruction to his servants that these gifts were from his brother Jacob. These gifts were to appease him, to appease Esau. In Hebrew, the appease being used here means to cover his face, an expression meaning the covering over his guilt. Jacob was painfully aware that he had sinned against his brother. Let's continue. Verse 22. During the night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 servant wives, and his 11 sons, and crossed the Jabbok River with them. After taking them to the other side, he sent over all his possessions. The passage says, during the night Jacob got up, suggests that he was already in bed. And Jacob decided to hide his family, 2 wives, 2 servant wives, 11 sons. Benjamin was not yet born. And he separated them far from himself to keep them safe in case there was a conflict between him and Esau. You might ask, why doesn't the passage mention Jacob's daughter Dinah? Didn't they have a daughter? Well, according to scholars, Dinah was omitted because she will not play a role in the genesis of the nations of Israel. So the author's concern was the forefathers of the 12 tribes of Israel. Verse 24. This left Jacob all alone in the camp. And a man came and wrestled with him until the dawn began to break. When the man saw that he would not win the match, he touched Jacob's hip and wrenched it out of his socket. Jacob remains alone also because he decided to spend the night in prayer to be with God. Because God was his only hope. He felt he was putting his innocent family in danger. However, while he was there praying by himself, a man came and wrestled with him, suggesting that it was the man, a mysterious, unidentified person, who initiated the attack, which must have surprised Jacob. He thought an enemy was seeking his life, so he wrestled with the man. Jacob put forth all his strength and did not relax his effort for a moment because he was battling for his life. and the sense of his guilt pressed on him also. His sin serviced, trying to shut him out from God. He feels that this is the consequence of him sinning against his family and his God. But in his terrible extremity, he remembered God's promises, and his whole heart went out in entreaty for his mercy. The struggle continued for the entire night. The Hebrew word wrestle is dust, which suggests the dynamic of the wrestling and rolling around in the dust. And when the man saw that he would not win the match, well, sounded like Jacob was stronger and he was winning, and this unidentified man was the weaker one during this wrestling match. We know that this other man who came to wrestle with Jacob was Christ, right? So this passage actually has a deeper meaning, according to a Bible scholar called Jack Dukin. He said this passage is referring to a theological lesson about God in his relationship with man. When Jesus confronted man on earth and died on the cross, it was perceived as weakness. But we now know that this was an expression of his grace and love. He did this to save humanity. This weakness was immediately contradicted in this passage, right? Because the man's next move shows he wasn't weak after all. He touched Jacob's hip and wrenched it out of his socket. So at this point, Jacob now realized the stranger that he was wrestling with was from heaven. He was a heavenly messenger. It was Christ, the angel of the covenant, who had revealed himself to Jacob. Verse 26. Then the man said, "Let me go, for the dawn is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." "What is your name?" the man asked. He replied, "Jacob." "Your name will no longer be Jacob," the man told him. "From now on you will be called Israel, because you have fought with God and with men and have won." "Please tell me your name," Jacob said. "Why do you want to know my name?" the man replied. And then he blessed Jacob there. Jacob named the place Peniel, which means the face of God. For he said, "I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been spared." The sun was rising as Jacob left Peniel, and he was limping because of the injury to his hip. Even today, the people of Israel don't eat the tendon near the hip socket because of what happened that night when the man strained the tendon of Jacob's hip. While Jacob was now disabled and suffering pain, but he would not loosen his hold on this stranger. All penitent and broken, he clung to this heavenly messenger. He wept and made supplication, pleading for a blessing. He must have the assurance that his sin was pardoned. Physical pain was not sufficient to divert his mind from this object. His determination grew stronger, his faith more earnest and persevering until the very end. This heavenly messenger tried to release himself. He said, "Let me go, because the day is breaking." But Jacob answered, "I will not let you go, except you bless me." If this had been a boastful, presumptuous confidence, Jacob would have been instantly destroyed. But his was the assurance of one who confesses his own unworthiness and yet trusts the faithfulness of a covenant-keeping God. Jacob's wrestling with an angel epitomizes the whole of Jacob's life. He has struggled with his brother, his father, and his father-in-law, and now he struggles with God. Jacob's own words express the substance of these narratives about him. I will not let you go unless you bless me. He is a graphic picture of Jacob struggling for blessing, struggling with God and with a man. Are we not the same? We struggle daily with ourselves, with others. We try to live well, but in reality, what we are craving for is blessing from God, to be near God. So, what does this narrative teach us about God? Number one, God does not forget. Time can go by in our lives, and we can think that God has forgotten the promises that He made to us. You see here, for 20 years, Jacob was separated from his family. During that time, his father grew old. His mother evidently passed away. It would be easy to think during this long period of trial that God has forgotten Jacob, but He didn't. God had not forgotten Jacob, and God will never forget us too. Number two, God wants us to seek His face. As Jacob wrestles with God, God tells Jacob it is time for him to go. He wanted to leave, but Jacob will not allow the Lord to go until he receives His blessing. So God wants us to come to a point in our lives where our relationship with Him is more important than anything else. He will allow us to go through times of struggle so that we will seek His face. Number three, God has a plan. While Jacob was serving Laban for those 20 years, God's plan had not diminished. God had a plan for Jacob's life, and it would be completed. God promised to bless Jacob, and He did. Next week, we will get into another significance of Jacob's wrestling with the angel. Happy Sabbath.